They didn't just borrow my driveway. They erased it. Paved right over it like the last 8 years of my life there didn't count for much. And the wild part is, for a minute, I actually wondered if I was the crazy one. I live on the corner of Maple Ridge and 4th, in a neighborhood that's mostly older ranch homes, chain-link fences, kids riding bikes in the street, folks who wave even if they don't remember your name. I bought my place back in 2016, small 2-bedroom, detached garage leaning just slightly to the left like it's tired, wide gravel driveway that curves along the side of the house and wraps toward the back. That driveway was half the reason I bought the place. I run a small landscaping business. Nothing fancy, just me, a couple guys in the busy months, an old Ford F-250, a flatbed trailer, mowers, trimmers, blowers, the whole noisy parade. That driveway let me park everything off the street. No HOA breathing down my neck. No blocking neighbors. No drama. I kept it tidy. I always have. My dad raised me that way. If you own it, you take care of it. If it's not yours, you leave it alone. For 8 years, nobody had a problem. Then the Callahans moved in next door. Derek and Monica Callahan bought the house beside mine last spring. Word around the block was they paid way over asking. Cash. Within 2 weeks, contractors were crawling all over the place. Dumpster in the yard. White SUVs without estate plates. Granite slabs getting carried inside like they were delivering treasure to a castle. They painted the brick a soft gray, replaced the lawn with something that looked like it belonged on a golf course, installed uplighting that made their house glow at night like it was auditioning for a magazine spread. At first, I didn't think much of it. People fix up houses. That's fine. But then came the looks. The first time Derek really noticed me was one morning at 6:45. I was warming up my truck, loading a pallet of sod onto the trailer. He stepped out onto his brand new porch in joggers and a quarter zip, holding a stainless steel tumbler like it was a prop. He didn't wave. He just looked at my truck, then at the trailer, then back at his house. A few days later he came over, smiling the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Hey man," he said, extending a hand. "Derek, we're just trying to elevate the neighborhood a little, you know?" I shook his hand. "Good to meet you." He nodded toward my driveway. "You ever think about maybe enclosing that? Or moving the equipment? It's just, we've invested a lot next door." Invested? That word stuck with me. "It's on my property," I said, keeping my voice level. "And I keep it clean." He gave a tight little chuckle. "Sure. Just saying. Curb appeal matters." That was the first crack. The second came a week later when I pulled into my driveway and saw 2 bright orange traffic cones sitting right near the edge closest to his yard. Just inside my gravel. Not on the line. Inside. I stared at them for a long second, engine still running. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe some kid dragged them there. I got out, picked them up, and placed them neatly on Derek's pristine grass, right next to his mailbox. The next evening, he was at my door. He didn't bother with the joggers this time. Slacks. Buttoned down. Like he'd dressed for a meeting. "Those cones were marking where we planned to expand our driveway," he said. No smile now. "We had a survey done." "Funny," I replied. "Because that section is mine." He tilted his head. "Property lines can be complicated." "Not really," I said. "They're on paper." He held my gaze for a long moment, then shrugged. "We'll see." That phrase, "we'll see." It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was worse. It was certain. About 10 days later, I came home from a job across town and heard machinery before I even turned onto my street. The sound of a compactor. The smell hit me next. Hot asphalt. My stomach dropped. I rounded the corner, and there it was. Fresh black pavement laid over a clean 10-foot strip of what used to be my gravel driveway, seamlessly connecting to Derek's newly widened concrete pad. And running along the edge of it, a decorative black metal fence, about 4 feet tall, planted a good 8 feet into what I knew was my property. For a second, I just sat in the truck, hands on the wheel, heart pounding slow and heavy. They hadn't just nudged the line. They'd moved it. I got out and walked straight to their front door. Monica answered, wine glass in hand, like this was all perfectly normal. "Oh," she said, feigning surprise. "Can I help you?" "Your driveway is on my land," I said. No yelling, just facts. "And that fence is 8 feet over." She took a sip. "Derek had it surveyed. We wouldn't build without checking." "I have my survey," I said, "from when I bought the house." She smiled, thin and polished. "Maybe you should double-check it." The door closed gently. Not slammed. Not rushed. Just closed. I stood there on their porch, looking at the reflection of myself in their new glass storm door, and I felt something shift inside me. Not just anger. Something deeper. Like someone had walked into my house and rearranged the furniture while I was at work. That night, I pulled out my paperwork. Deed. Survey. Plat map from the county. The measurements were clear. The metal pins in the ground matched. I even found the original iron stake buried under some grass near the corner. It lined up exactly where I thought it would. They had built on my land. I called Derek. He answered on the third ring. You need to remove the asphalt and the fence, I said. You're over the line. He actually laughed. A short, sharp sound. We've improved our property, he replied. If you've got an issue, call a lawyer. Then he hung up. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was scared, but because I kept replaying it in my head. The cones. The survey comment. The confidence. This wasn't a mistake. It was a gamble. They figured I wouldn't fight it. That I'd shrug and let it go because court is expensive and stress is exhausting. They thought I'd roll over. They were wrong. I called a real surveyor the next morning. And while I waited for the legal wheels to start turning, I watched Derek park his SUV on my land every single night like he owned it. That's when I decided if he wanted to use my property, I was going to use it too. Now I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I'm not the kind of guy who looks for fights. I build retaining walls for a living. I plant trees. I fix drainage problems so other people don't have to think about them. I like solving things quietly. But there's a difference between avoiding conflict and swallowing disrespect. And every evening after that call, when I watched Derek back his silver Lexus SUV onto that fresh black asphalt that crossed over into my gravel, I felt that line inside me getting thinner. The surveyor came out 3 days later. Older guy named Hank Morrison. Sunburned neck, clipboard, boots that had seen real dirt. He walked the line with his equipment, checked the existing pins, drove in 2 fresh stakes, and then stood there staring at the fence. Well, he said, scratching his chin, they're about 8 feet over. Clean over. No gray area? I asked. Not unless the earth shifted and nobody told us. He handed me the stamped survey a week later. Official. Signed. Clear as day. That 10-foot strip was mine. I took a copy over to Derek that evening. He opened the door halfway this time, like I might rush him. I had it resurveyed, I said, holding up the paperwork. You're over the line. You need to remove it. He barely glanced at it. Our contractor stands by his measurements. It's not about your contractor, I said. It's about the county record. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Look, we've put a lot of money into that expansion. We host clients. We need the space. You don't even use that whole section. That's when I understood it wasn't confusion. It was convenience. He didn't think I deserved it as much as he did. I use all of it, I said quietly. And even if I didn't, it's still mine. He gave me that same little shrug. Then call your lawyer. So I did. My attorney, Lisa Grant, didn't even blink when I laid everything out in her office. She tapped the survey with a pen. This is clean, she said. They're trespassing, and they built permanent improvements. We'll file a demand letter, then move forward if they ignore it. How long? I asked. She gave me the lawyer answer. Months. Maybe longer. Months. Meanwhile, every day, Derek parked on that asphalt like he'd planted a flag. That's when something in me clicked. If the law was going to move slow, I could move fast. And legally. Because here's the thing no one seems to remember about property disputes. Until a judge says otherwise. Ownership doesn't change just because someone poured concrete. That strip was mine. So I used it. The first delivery happened on a Tuesday morning. I had a big commercial job starting across town. Needed mulch anyway. I called my supplier and adjusted the drop-off location. Dump it at my house, I told them. Along the side driveway. All of it. The truck rolled up around 9 a.m. Derek was gone. Monica's SUV was in their garage. The driver backed up carefully, wheels crunching on the edge of my gravel. Right here, he asked, looking unsure because of the fence. Right there, I said, pointing to the center of the freshly paved strip that crossed into my land. The hydraulic lift whined, and then 3 cubic yards of dark, steaming mulch cascaded down in a thick avalanche, landing directly across Derek's new access point. It was beautiful. By the time Derek came home around 5:30, the pile had settled into a broad, stubborn mound blocking the exact path he'd created. He stopped in the street, sat there for a moment. Then his door flew open. What the hell is this? he shouted, striding toward me as I stood by my truck. Mulch, I said calmly. For work. You can't block our driveway. I tilted my head. I'm on my property. He pointed at the fence. That's ours. Survey says otherwise. He stepped closer, lowering his voice like that made him more intimidating. Move it. You're welcome to use your original driveway, I replied. On your property. His jaw tightened. For a second, I thought he might actually lose it. But instead he turned and stomped back to his SUV, reversed awkwardly, and parked on the street. The mulch stayed there for 3 days. On day 2, Monica taped a note to my mailbox. It said, "Neighborhood standards matter." No signature. On day 3, I loaded most of it up for my job. By day 4, the asphalt was visible again. Derek parked there that night. So I escalated. The next week, I had 10 tons of gravel delivered. 10 tons. This time I was home when the truck arrived, and so was Derek. He came running out in gym shorts and a polo as the truck positioned itself. "You're not dumping that here," he yelled. The driver looked at me. "Boss." "Right there," I said again, pointing squarely at the disputed strip. The load hit the ground with a thunderous crash, rocks spilling outward like a landslide, covering every inch of that smooth black asphalt and pressing up against the decorative fence. Derek lost it. He pulled out his phone right there and called the police. I leaned against my truck and waited. The officer who arrived was younger than I expected, probably mid-20s, calm eyes, hands resting on his belt. He listened to Derek first, nodding politely, while Derek gestured wildly at the pile. "He's intentionally blocking our driveway," Derek said. "This is harassment." The officer walked over to me. "You the homeowner?" "Yes, sir." "You have documentation?" I handed him the survey and deed copy. He studied it for a long moment, then walked the line, glanced at the fence posts planted deep into my soil, and finally turned back to Derek. "Sir," he said evenly, "this appears to be a civil matter. According to this survey, the materials are on his property, but it blocks our access." Derek snapped. The officer didn't raise his voice. "Then you may want to reconsider where your access is." For a split second, I saw something crack in Derek's expression. Not anger, doubt. The officer handed me back my papers, tipped his hat slightly, and left. The gravel stayed for a week. Derek had to park on the street. Clients coming over had to walk past a mountain of stone to reach his glowing front door. The aesthetic he cared so much about was now anchored by a reminder that lines exist for a reason. But I wasn't done. The third move wasn't about obstruction. It was about symbolism. I rented a bright blue portable toilet for one of my larger landscaping crews. Didn't really need it at my house, but I placed it precisely on the property line, centered on the disputed strip, door facing Derek's living room windows. It was technically fully on my land. Every evening, that blue rectangle stood there like a monument. Derek came over the first night it appeared. "You've made your point," he said through clenched teeth. "Have I?" I asked. "This is childish." Pouring asphalt on someone else's property felt pretty grown up. He looked like he wanted to say more, but instead he just turned and walked away. 2 weeks later, I was served papers. They were suing me for damages, claiming I'd interfered with their property enjoyment, reduced their home value, created a nuisance. I read the complaint twice, then called Lisa. She didn't sound surprised. "We'll countersue," she said. "Trespass, encroachment, illegal construction." That's when it stopped being about parking. It became about principle. And somewhere in the middle of all that paperwork, I realized something else. This wasn't just about space for Derek. It was about control, about moving into a working-class neighborhood and reshaping it to fit his idea of what it should be. My truck, my gravel, my business. None of it matched his picture. So he tried to redraw the lines. What he didn't expect was that I knew exactly where those lines were. The court date landed on a gray Tuesday morning in October, the kind where the sky looks undecided and the air smells like cold pavement. I remember standing outside the county courthouse holding a paper cup of coffee I didn't really want, watching Derek step out of his SUV in a tailored navy suit like he was heading into a board meeting instead of small claims court. He didn't look at me. Monica did. She gave me that same tight smile I'd seen through the storm door months earlier. Except this time, there was something else behind it. Not confidence. Not quite worry either. Just irritation. Like I'd forced them to waste their time. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than you'd expect. Fluorescent lights, wooden benches, A judge who looked like he'd seen every flavor of neighbor dispute you could imagine and was tired of all of them. Derek's attorney went first. He painted a picture of me as vindictive, said I'd deliberately obstructed access, lowered property value, created visual blight. He said the Callahans had acted in good faith based on their own measurements and had invested significant money improving their property. Improving. That word again. Then it was Lisa's turn. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't get dramatic. She just laid everything out like bricks in a straight line. Certified survey. County plat. Deed. Photographs showing the fence posts sunk well beyond the boundary. Invoices from the paving company dated after Derek had already been verbally informed of the dispute. Then Hank, the surveyor, took the stand. He explained how property pins work, how they're set, how they don't shift because someone wants a wider driveway. He even brought a blown-up diagram that showed, in clean black lines, exactly where Derek's fence cut across my land. Derek's attorney tried to argue that boundaries can sometimes be unclear, that long-term use can imply shared access. Hank just shook his head. Not in this case. The markers are intact. It's precise. Then came the part that almost felt unreal. Lisa introduced Derek's so-called survey into evidence. It wasn't a stamped document. It wasn't filed with the county. It was a printed sketch from a contractor, measurements handwritten in pen, based on approximate distance from curb. The judge stared at it for a long moment. "Mr. Callahan," he said, peering over his glasses, "this is not a legal survey." Derek shifted in his chair. "We relied on our contractor." "That reliance," the judge replied evenly, "does not transfer ownership." There it was. Ownership. The room felt very quiet. The judge ruled from the bench. Full removal of the encroaching fence. Removal of asphalt covering my property. Restoration of the gravel surface to its prior condition. Payment of my legal fees. And then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "Property lines are not suggestions." I didn't realize how tightly I'd been holding my shoulders until they dropped. Outside, Derek finally looked at me. "This didn't have to go this far," he said. I studied him for a second. All the confidence from months earlier was gone. He looked smaller somehow. "You paved over my driveway," I said. "It went that far the moment you did." He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, then closed it. Monica touched his arm. They walked away. The restoration took about 3 weeks. Contractors came back, cut the asphalt clean along the boundary, jackhammered the portion that crossed into my land. The sound echoed down the street like a reminder. The decorative fence posts were pulled out one by one, leaving behind narrow holes in the dirt that I filled myself. When the last of the blacktop was hauled away, my gravel driveway looked scarred but intact. I raked it smooth, spreading fresh stone over the worn patches until it looked like it had before all this started. One evening, as I stood there looking at it, old Mrs. Peterson from across the street shuffled over with her little white dog. "Glad you stuck to your guns," she said softly. "Some folks think money makes the rules." I smiled. Lines were there before either of us showed up. She nodded like that made sense to her. Life slowly returned to normal. I parked my truck where I always had. My trailer sat squarely inside my boundary. Derek went back to using the driveway he'd started with. We don't talk. We nod sometimes. That's about it. But here's the part one don't say out loud very often. For a while, I questioned myself. Was the mulch petty? Sure. Was the gravel dramatic? Absolutely. The porta-potty? Okay, that one was a little theatrical. I could have waited quietly for the court to handle it. But every time I picture that fresh asphalt crossing into my gravel like it belonged there, I remember the feeling in my chest that day. The assumption. The gamble that I wouldn't fight back because it was inconvenient. There's something about boundaries that goes beyond property. It's about respect. About not rewriting someone else's space because it doesn't match your version of what the world should look like. Derek wanted a cleaner line. A wider entrance. A neighborhood that fit his investment portfolio. And I get it, in a way. He worked hard for what he had. So did I. The difference is, I didn't try to take 8 feet of his yard to prove it. Sometimes I wonder if I could have handled it differently. Sat down longer. Tried mediation first. Maybe we would have ended up in the same place without the blue plastic monument on the property line. Or maybe not. Because here's the thing I've learned. Some people don't test you because they're confused. They test you because they think you won't push back. And if I'd let that asphalt stay, even just a little, I don't think it would have stopped there. It would have been the truck next. The trailer. The curb appeal. Maybe pressure from neighbors who suddenly saw my place as the weak link. Instead, the line is still there. Measured, marked, real. Every so often, I catch Derek glancing at that boundary when he pulls in. Not with anger, just awareness. And that's enough for me. Now I'm curious what you think. Was I justified in using my own property the way I did? Or did I cross a line trying to defend one? Would you have handled it quietly, or made a point the same way I did? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them all. And if you've ever dealt with a neighbor who forgot where the line was, share your story too. Sometimes the real drama doesn't happen in courtrooms. It happens 10 feet at a time, right outside your front door.